My wife threatened to frame me for SA if I divorced her after discovering her affair. I quietly documented her infidelity and protected myself legally. When we finally went to divorce court, the evidence changed everything. Hello Reddit I Plus here. I'm writing this a couple of months after my divorce was finally finalized. I'm free. That still feels strange to say. For almost 18 years, I thought I was married to the person I would grow old with. I thought our biggest problems would be ordinary things like bills, school runs, arguments over who forgot to buy groceries, and figuring out what to do with the kids during summer vacation. Instead, I ended up sitting in a lawyer's office watching videos of my wife cheating on me while trying to figure out how I was going to protect myself from the woman I once trusted more than anyone. And somehow, the affair wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came after I confronted her, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm 44 and my ex-wife is 42. We have 2 children, a daughter who was 8 at the time and a son who was 5. For most of our marriage, I worked long hours while she stayed home with the kids. That was our arrangement. When our daughter was born, my wife left her job because daycare costs were ridiculous and she wanted to be home with her. When our son came along a few years later, she continued being a stay-at-home mom. I never resented it. I worked, paid the mortgage, handled most of the major expenses, and made sure she had spending money. She handled the house and the children. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, I realized the marriage had been dying for a long time. I just didn't know it. It started with my daughter. One Saturday afternoon, my daughter came into my home office. She looked nervous. I asked her what was wrong. She climbed onto the chair beside me and said, "Dad, I need to tell you something, but Mom said I'm not supposed to." My stomach dropped. I asked her what she meant. She started crying. She told me that sometimes when I was working on Saturdays, a man came to the house. Apparently, my wife had told the kids he was a special friend. My daughter said she had seen him several times. She also told me that her mother had given her and her brother treats, toys, and extra screen time if they promised not to tell me. I remember sitting there completely frozen. I didn't immediately assume the worst. I asked her what the man looked like. She described him. I knew exactly who she was talking about. He had worked with my wife years earlier. I had met him several times. And suddenly, 100 little things that I had ignored began connecting in my head. My wife had been different for months. She was constantly irritated. She snapped at the kids. She criticized me over everything: my clothes, my weight, my job, my family. Even the fact that I had smoked cigarettes when I was younger, despite having quit years before we even had our second child. Sometimes she'd lock herself in our bedroom and cry. Other times she'd accuse me of not caring about her. I had assumed she was unhappy. I thought maybe she was struggling with being a stay-at-home mother. I never imagined she was having an affair. After my daughter told me, I barely slept that night. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, so I decided not to confront my wife immediately. I needed the truth first. I started looking for answers. I checked everything I legally could. I reviewed our finances. I looked at our shared accounts. I noticed restaurant charges that didn't make sense, hotel charges, fuel purchases in areas my wife normally never visited. Then I started paying attention to her schedule. There were girls' nights that suddenly became frequent, errands that lasted 3 or 4 hours, trips to stores she had no reason to visit. I felt like I was going insane. Then I made a decision. I installed security cameras in common areas of our home. I made sure I wasn't putting cameras in places where privacy laws could be violated, and before relying on anything in court, I checked the local rules with a lawyer. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted evidence. Because if I accused my wife and she denied everything, I knew exactly what would happen. She'd say I was paranoid. She'd say I was controlling. She'd tell everyone I had lost my mind, and I needed to know whether I was destroying my marriage over nothing. Within days, I had my answer. There was a man coming into my house. It was the former coworker, the same man my daughter had described. They weren't behaving like friends. They were behaving like lovers. I sat in front of my computer that first night and watched footage I wish I had never seen. I watched my wife kiss him. I watched him hold her. I watched her laugh in a way I hadn't heard from her in years, and something inside me just went numb. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't confront her. I just sat there. Then I called my older sister. She came over and I showed her what I'd found. She was silent for almost a minute. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. I saw her with him before. Apparently, several months earlier, my sister had seen my wife at a bar. She'd been sitting very close to this man. There was touching, whispering, laughing. My sister hadn't been certain enough to accuse her of anything, so she kept quiet. She apologized over and over. I told her she didn't have anything to apologize for. Neither of us knew. Or at least, I thought neither of us knew. Then we discovered something worse. My sister and her husband helped me piece together my wife's movements. Again, we were careful about what we did and what we used as evidence. We weren't interested in doing anything illegal. We were interested in documenting what was happening. One evening, my wife told me she was going out with friends. She wasn't. She drove across town and met the same man. My sister and her husband saw them together from a public location. They recorded what they could legally observe. And that's when I noticed something strange. The man kept touching my wife's stomach. At first, I didn't understand. Then my sister looked at me. "Do you think she's pregnant?" I honestly couldn't breathe. My wife had been acting sick in the mornings. She'd stopped drinking. She'd suddenly become obsessed with certain foods. I'd assumed it was stress. Now I had another possibility. I arranged for a lawyer to advise me about how to handle the situation. But I still didn't confront her. I wanted to know how deep the betrayal went, so I told my wife I had to take a business trip. In reality, I took personal leave from work. I stayed at a hotel. I monitored the situation remotely. And within hours of me leaving, the man showed up at my house. My wife let him in. They spent the night together. I won't describe what happened. You can imagine. But the conversation afterward destroyed whatever little love I still had for her. They talked about the baby. She was already several months pregnant. They talked about how they were going to hide the pregnancy for as long as possible. They talked about what would happen when the baby was born. And then my wife said something I will never forget. She said she was tired of pretending to be a good wife. She said she felt like she'd wasted years being married to someone boring. Then she started talking about our children. Her affair partner asked what would happen to them after the divorce. Her response? "They can stay with him." That's what she said. She didn't want custody. She didn't even seem particularly upset about losing them. She said they'd become too attached to me anyway. Then she told him she wanted a fresh start. A new baby, a new life, a new man. As if the previous 18 years had simply been an inconvenient chapter she wanted to erase. I sat in that hotel room, staring at the screen. I was shaking. I wanted to drink. I wanted to call her. I wanted to drive home and confront them. Instead, I ordered food. I ate alone. Then I watched a completely stupid movie because I needed something, anything, to occupy my brain. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for the marriage. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to expose her publicly. I was going to protect myself and my children. And I was going to leave. I hired a lawyer. The following morning, I contacted a divorce attorney. I brought everything: messages, financial records, a timeline, the evidence I had legally obtained, the footage. My attorney watched several clips without saying much. Then he looked at me. "Do you understand what happens next?" I said yes. He said, "Then don't contact her about this. Don't threaten her. Don't tell her what evidence you have. Let me handle it." That was probably the best advice anyone gave me. I followed it. A few weeks later, my wife was served divorce papers. She opened them while I was working from home. The moment she realized what they were, she completely lost it. She stormed into my office. "You can't do this." I looked at her. "I'm filing for divorce." After everything I've done for this family, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe she was saying it. She started crying, then yelling, then accusing me of ruining her life. I told her calmly that I wasn't discussing the marriage with her anymore. That's when she changed tactics. Her voice became quiet, almost frighteningly calm. She said, "If you take me to court, I'll tell them you abused me." I stared at her. She continued, "I'll say you forced yourself on me." I felt the blood drain from my face. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a threat. She told me she would tell the police I had sexually assaulted her. She said she'd make sure I lost my job. She said she'd make sure everyone believed her. Then she smiled. That was the moment I knew I was dealing with someone completely different from the woman I thought I'd married. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten her back. I simply told her, "Do what you think you need to do." Then I called my attorney. The police arrived. A few hours later, my wife locked herself in our bedroom. Then she called the police. She claimed I had become aggressive. She claimed she was afraid of me. I had never touched her, not once. When officers arrived, I kept my distance. I didn't interfere with them. I explained that we were going through a divorce and that I wanted everything documented. One officer asked whether I had any evidence regarding what had happened. I said yes. I showed them the relevant footage from the common areas. They saw her threatening to accuse me. They saw her behavior immediately before calling them. They saw that there had been no physical confrontation. I also gave my attorney the evidence and allowed him to deal with everything legally. The officers didn't simply take my word for it. They documented what they observed. And that mattered, because my wife had apparently expected the police to arrive, hear her story, and immediately arrest me. That didn't happen. Then the pregnancy came out. The divorce process became complicated very quickly. My wife had to explain the affair, she had to explain the pregnancy, and eventually, a paternity test confirmed what everyone already suspected. The baby wasn't mine. That was one of the strangest moments of my life. I remember looking at the result and feeling almost nothing. A year earlier, I would have been devastated. By then, I had already mourned the marriage. My attorney also helped me understand that an affair doesn't automatically mean someone gets nothing in a divorce, regardless of what people say online. Property, support, custody, and other issues depend heavily on the jurisdiction and individual circumstances. So I stopped thinking about destroying her. I started thinking about protecting myself. That changed everything. The children chose their own reality. The custody process was painful. My daughter eventually told the truth about the man coming to the house. She also explained how her mother had encouraged the children to keep secrets. My son was too young to understand everything, but he understood one thing. He wanted to be with me. The court didn't simply accept what either parent claimed. There were evaluations. There were interviews. There were professionals involved. And the evidence concerning my wife's behavior became impossible to ignore. My wife initially fought for custody, then strangely, she stopped. She became increasingly focused on her new relationship and her pregnancy. Eventually, the children spent the vast majority of their time with me. That hurt in a way I can't properly explain. Because I had never wanted to take their mother away from them. I wanted them to have two loving parents. Instead, they had to watch their family fall apart because of decisions their mother made. The final court hearing. The divorce took months. There were arguments over the house, finances, custody, support, property, and accusations. But the evidence made it difficult for her to maintain the version of events she'd originally presented. My attorney presented the relevant material properly. Not everything I had collected was admissible. Some things had to be excluded. That was fine. I didn't need every piece. I just needed the truth to be established through evidence that could legally be used. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. I kept the house. The children primarily stayed with me. The financial arrangements were settled. The pregnancy and paternity issues were no longer my responsibility. And my ex-wife moved out. The strangest part was the silence afterward. For almost 2 decades, I'd heard her voice every day. Then suddenly, she was gone. No arguments, no accusations, no slammed doors, no crying from behind a locked bedroom door. Just silence. What happened to her affair partner? As far as I know, they stayed together for a while, but apparently their relationship became far more difficult once the fantasy ended. Dating someone secretly is very different from building a life with them. Bills don't disappear, children don't disappear, responsibilities don't disappear. The excitement wears off. Reality arrives. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they eventually had serious problems. I honestly don't know whether they're still together. And I don't care. That's something I never thought I'd be able to say. My daughter asked me one question. A few weeks after the divorce, my daughter asked me, "Are you happy now?" I told her I was getting there. She thought about it. Then she said, "I'm happy because you're not sad all the time anymore." That nearly broke me because children notice everything, even when adults think they're hiding it. I hugged her and told her none of what happened was her fault. I also told her something I wish I'd understood earlier. She never needed to protect me from the truth. She never needed to keep secrets from either parent. And she never needed to choose sides. Looking back, do I regret installing the cameras? Honestly, I have complicated feelings about it. I understand why some people will say I went too far. I also understand why others will say I did what I had to do. But I will say this, if you're ever in a situation like mine, don't blindly copy what I did. Privacy and recording laws vary depending on where you live, and something that feels like obvious evidence might not be legal or admissible where you are. Get legal advice first. Don't retaliate. Don't threaten. Don't hack accounts. Don't secretly access someone's private messages. And if someone threatens to falsely accuse you of a serious crime, document the threat through lawful means and contact an attorney immediately. That part of my story could have gone very differently. One accusation could have destroyed my life. The part one still struggle. With people keep asking me whether I hate her, I don't. At least I don't think I do. Hate requires energy, and I'm tired. What I feel now is disappointment. I spent almost 20 years believing I knew someone. I built a family with her. I trusted her. I defended her. I worked overtime for her. I gave up vacations and opportunities because I thought we were building something together. And she apparently spent years convincing herself that I was the enemy. Maybe that's the hardest thing to accept. Not that she cheated, not even that she became pregnant by another man. It's that while I was trying to save a marriage I thought was struggling, She was quietly planning another life, a life where I was nothing more than the guy who paid the bills. Then, when I finally discovered the truth, she tried to make me afraid of leaving. She thought threatening me would make me stay. Instead, it made me realize I had to leave immediately. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago. My children are doing better. I'm doing better. I've started exercising again. I'm spending more time with my family. I'm sleeping through the night. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Sometimes I sit in the living room after the kids go to bed and think about everything that happened. I think about the man I was before I discovered the affair. Then I think about who I am now. I'm not happier because my marriage failed. I'm happier because I finally stopped trying to save something that the other person had already abandoned. So Reddit I plus audience, I guess this is where I ask the question I've been asking myself for months. How do you stop mourning the person you thought your spouse was, when the person they revealed themselves to be is someone you don't recognize at all? Because legally, the marriage is over, the house is mine, the divorce is finished, the evidence is filed away, the kids are safe, I'm free. But some nights, I still find myself grieving a woman who apparently never existed the way I believed she did, and honestly, I don't know what to do with that.